So, okay. Okay, the meeting is being recorded. That's good. Well, I just wanted to preface that if you guys hear background noise, I am on my balcony in New York City. So let me know. I could always move inside, but I wanted to try out and enjoy the fresh air as much as possible here. And so, what I mean by everybody is sort of an herbalist concept that I've heard from other herbal teachers is that when a person is just out and about doing their everyday human activities, what we don't realize is that we're very intertwined with the earth. And so our internal health is a representation of external environment because that helps shape our inner world. And there's a concept known as pharmacognosy or zoopharmacognosy, where animals, which we are the human animal, they seek almost like instinctually the remedies in the natural world that will improve their health. And so we can see this in animal behavior, and we could also see it in traditional herbal medicine where people just connect to the land, connect to the plants and other living beings that they have formed ecosystems with, and that can help them with specific areas of health. And just to give you an everyday sort of example, if you're eating plants for food, like in your salad or in your soup, or if you're drinking coffee or tea, which probably 99% of us are, you are probably, unbeknownst to yourself, engaging in potentially herbalism.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you're helping people identify that that is herbalism, and that herbalism is this like actual vocabulary that you can then use to help heal yourself or to work on your health.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. So very cool. So you do have this background in pharmaceuticals as well, because you are you are trained in pharmacy, and you pursued that background as well. Tell me about that. What made you want to go down that rabbit hole as well?
Well, that was my first career, I would say. And I see it as a beautiful bridge as well into the herbal space because it used to be one and the same, herbalism and pharmacy, right? It's just um, we are helping with the remedies themselves. The pharmacist and the herbalist is the expert of the medicines that are available, whether we're talking about whole food, whole plant, or we're talking about an isolated pharmaceutical, right? We're talking about medicinal substances. And I mentioned pharmacognosy, and that's literally what the word means. We're just seeking out what are these properties or qualities that are medicinal out in nature or nowadays synthesized, right, from a single pharmaceutical ingredient. And so Western medical practices, conventional medicine, nowadays they just specialize in prescribing a pill for every ill, right? But ancient times, we didn't have the pharmaceutical industry. And so we did look for the symbiosis and the synergy from nature itself. And so the herbalist would be the one to compound all these things. And eventually now we've kind of evolved into the pharmacy field. And unfortunately, a lot of the herbalism has been lost. However, I would say in my countries, right, I come from the Slavic countries, as you said. I was actually born and raised in Ukraine. So growing up there, visiting European countries and interviewing a lot of people on my own podcast that come from different cultures and backgrounds, I know that other countries have still kept those traditions side by side. Whereas if you are just kind of bred into the modernity of the Western allopathy, you might not be aware of that. And so I also see this as an opportunity to bridge the gap. And so when I was educated with my PharmD degree, I actually realized that, you know what, I don't really like dispensing, 20 to 30 pills because I went into the retail setting. And what I saw was that we were doing the pill for every ill. We were doing polypharmacy. So we were doing multiple drugs. We were treating side effects of other drugs with drugs. We were doing a lot of different doctors, not knowing what everybody else is prescribing. And we even had patients going to different pharmacies. So it's like super disorganized, decentralized, and we just end up having a person who's just on a lot of medications where we don't even know how they're interacting and what the drug interactions are and things like that. But we seem not to have a problem with that. But when you try to add an urban, it's all of a sudden, wow, what are the safety concerns? What are the precautions? So, long story short, through my own health challenges that were not addressed with conventional medicine, unfortunately, even through things like drug therapy and invasive procedures, including surgery and all kind of fancy diagnostics, and even stepping into the functional medicine world, doing a lot more of that kind of testing, I ultimately chose for myself to study herbalism for my personal health journey and healing, and also for my professional enhancement, because I wanted to have that sense of autonomy where I could view my whole life and my whole whatever I'm putting on my plate, whatever I'm ingesting, whatever I'm around, including now, right? Like nature therapy. And so immersing myself with those tools gave me back a sense of power. And I was actually able to use a lot of these more gentle modalities to improve my own health and well-being, and then eventually start a practice, and then eventually train other practitioners.
Yeah, so tell us about the and that's amazing that your story, it's something from a personal experience too, because I think that, choosing herbalism, why, it sounds like there's a really, um, um, a very engaging with nature perspective when you are choosing herbalism over others, and there's definitely a reason why it's not just part of that pharmaceutical approach anymore. It doesn't I don't know if it necessarily fits. Although there could be some disagreement with me about that, when we see like different models being presented in China, for example, where you can get a combination of traditional and allopathic methods with your actual healthcare. Um, I mean, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like there is a place for herbs within the allopathic system? Or do you think it's best that it's a separate thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's benefit in both models. I think if we keep it separate, like we are now in America, let's say, where it's a completely unregulated field, there's a lot of pros to that because we don't have like this regulating body that is like watching over and making sure that we're all practicing the same way. And at the same time, it has some drawbacks as well because it's sort of the wild, wild west, and we don't really have much to back up our credentials or our experience, which is like the golden ticket, right? It's the gold star in how we measure competency, right? We want to have a piece of paper, we want to have some credentials to look for in terms of building that trust and expertise. So it's a double-edged sword. And I think if we look to models like China or even like the former Soviet cultures that have also evolved this side by side, as I mentioned, we have it right in the pharmacy setting. We have herbs right in there. We have teas. We have extracts, different kinds of herbal extracts that people have as like a first line therapy. So instead of having a synthetic over the counter that people know about because we have a bunch of commercials going on about that thing, um, instead, different countries, they actually teach their young and keep this knowledge in the home, which is initially how this tradition started, right? Before it was written, and even while it was written, it was passed down from lineage to lineage and kept in the home. So a person, a child would know to identify specific plants or trees in their area, or just know how to like go and reach for a plantain, right? When there's a cut or a scrape. They also, as an adult, would know, okay, if I'm having like stress or, something like that, I can go to the pharmacy and grab a tincture of motherwort or hawthorn, which are very popular in my culture. And as you know, they're not really considered nervines, but that is how we use them in my culture. And it makes a lot of sense of why we do that. And so even though they're considered cardiovascular, right, tonics, they're also nervines too, in a way. So what I'm getting at is people don't reach for drugs or a doctor to get a prescription that is covered by insurance in those kind of models. And I think that's where we can build some options for people. The insurance model is another big reason why our healthcare is so different from other systems. And I think when you have to pay for things out of pocket, you're going to think twice about a brand name medication that costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars, or an herb that you can go and harvest or cultivate, or food that you can buy for yourself, or just a cheaper thing in the pharmacy like an herbal tincture.
Yeah, the cost is definitely worth it. So let's talk about the Functional Medicine Pharmacists Alliance, which you have been participating in for some time, because it sounds like there's lots of other people who think the same way as you. They are in pharmacy or pharmaceutical work, and now they're thinking about other options. And we're seeing this a lot with nurses as well and other conventional practitioners who are just thinking about what other tools they can use, or even a whole other system of assessment and healthcare that they can use for their patients because they're seeing gaps in the system that they currently work in, or they're burnt out, or they're not seeing results at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was founded by a friend and colleague of mine, and we actually met in B school. And she's a pharmacist out in Ohio, and she realized also this need, and she has a personal story as well about how she and her husband went to a medical practitioner that practice the functional approach in order to actually get to the root causes of what was going on with them. And they were able to do testing and get the right protocols and get off, let's say, conventional over the counters and pharmaceuticals. So, she has a great success story. And she's also been part of a lot of different conversations, attending different professional organizations in pharmacy and the medical world in general. And so she saw this need, this gap, that we didn't have really a functional organization that advocated for pharmacists specifically. Because a lot of these schools that now are teaching this approach, they will include all the different professions except pharmacist, and they wouldn't give us credit, even though we do have the conventional licensing and credentials, because we do have a lot of restrictions. We can't prescribe, we can't diagnose, we can't treat, and so we're very different from doctors or NPs or PAs, and a gamut of others that are recognized. And so she filled this gap, and she decided, just to see like what other pharmacists are needing. And she saw that a lot of them have questions about how to get into this field. And also, a lot of them have successfully implemented a level of functional or compounding with more bio-identical ingredients. And so, like a more holistic approach within the retail setting or the specialty compound setting as pharmacists. So she decided to create this space that would allow all of us to come together and network and share industry best practices, et cetera. And so I joined her team, where we're now holding boot camps and supporting different pharmacists from different states that are wanting to create this movement. And we're hoping to get leaders in each state to create some systemic changes and potentially some legislature that we can advocate for all together.
Well, I have another pharmacist that I'll send your way. So I know someone who might not be in your network already. So that's pretty awesome. What a cool thing. And so, since the last time we spoke, again, our practices aren't stagnant. We've seen different clients for herbalism. What kinds of things have come up, or things that you were like, that's interesting. I haven't seen that before, or I'm seeing quite a bit of this right now in regards to health. And of course, thinking about our local bioregion and how that might affect how people and what their needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. What I've noticed in my practice, and also seeing and communicating with other practitioners in my area and also just all over, I'm seeing a lot of like infectious diseases, to be honest, and a lot of questions around like how to support a normal microbiome, right? Because if we think about it, all these different fungal, viral, and bacterial DNAs floating around our body, some of it has been evolved and co evolved with us and is a normal part of our cells and our DNA and our gut microbiome, right? And the more diverse is the key, right? That's how we can keep the opportunistic infections out. But I don't know if it's triggered by COVID and us having, a very weird immune response to COVID itself, and then the post effects of that, whether people had COVID itself or they got the vaccine, or maybe just the precautions that they were taking and overly being overly cleanly and protecting themselves for a couple of years, to not come into contact with germs at all. Right? I'm seeing a lot of people with things like Lyme or Epstein-Barr virus or parasites or questions about that, um, and even like what we're calling post-COVID or long COVID sequela. And so sometimes there's no official diagnosis. Sometimes they go to a functional provider to get a diagnosis. There's also like a lot of mold activation as well, so that would be the fungal side of it. But yeah, a lot of viruses and fungal and potentially parasites or other kinds of microorganisms that seem to um, either be coming out of the woodworks, or that we're just kind of diagnosing people a little differently nowadays. And we're realizing that these are at the root cause level of a lot of pro-inflammatory chronic conditions. It could be one of the root causes. I'm not saying it's the root cause, but it's one of these contributing factors that we can look at. And also the immune system in general, just kind of looking at it as this central system that we need to pay attention to, because we're also seeing an uptick in cancer. Now, I don't work with cancer directly, but the involvement of the immune system, whether it's autoimmune, which is definitely on the rise, cancer, or these chronic debilitating sort of conditions, whether it's overtly gut related, which we know a lot of inflammatory um, bowel diseases or irritable bowel or any other kind of like gastric um, issues that people are having, but also like the joint pain, inflammation, chronic fatigue, migraines, like all of these things. So tying that into some of the dysbiosis and some of these maybe opportunistic infections that are underdiagnosed, or we're just attributing it to the microorganism itself, I think is just something worth looking at, and not to demonize the microorganism, but to understand that this could be one of our differential diagnoses. And maybe this would give us some ideas about how to further work with this patient or client.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It is interesting about the microbiome and how much there is still to learn and to, yeah, say maybe we could be looking at that as a diagnostic way, not just there seems to be a lot of misinformation about probiotics in general too, and really what is supposed to be the health of the microbiome. So that's very interesting. And so I like the partnered brand that you work with, like our herbals, they're just fantastic. Why did you go with Slavic herbals formulations? And yeah, what is the gist behind that?
Yeah, thanks. This was just kind of done on a whim, to be honest, just because the opportunity was there and I decided to go for it. But when I was starting my business and my practice, I knew that someday I would want to educate other professionals and practitioners. And I sort of jumped into it before I even knew that I was ready, because again, I saw the opportunity and I decided to go for it. And then same thing with a brand, like an actual product line. I also knew that this was something that I liked doing. I enjoyed formulating. I enjoyed making different teas for myself and for people. I would do it, handmade, handcrafted. I did it also in the herb shop that we worked in, that I worked in for a while. And so I enjoyed the process, and I knew that maybe someday I would do it, on a larger scale than just kind of handcrafted. And there was also a demand in the pharmacy that I used to work at, because we had a lot of teas, and I noticed that my formulas did really well for people. So I wanted to do it in an official way, where it would be in a facility that packages everything accordingly and that would have lot numbers and batch numbers and all of that stuff. But I didn't necessarily want to rent out a kitchen and do all of that myself. So I was kind of keeping an eye open for next steps in that direction. And what happened was I actually got introduced just by networking on LinkedIn. I got introduced to this pair of Ukrainian women who moved to Bulgaria and created this Lekar botanical brand. And Lekar in our language means doctor or healer. Healer would probably be a more appropriate translation. And so they were working on this really cool, like you said, patented technology, and they've won a lot of industry awards for this fermentation process that they have built to cold ferment and naturally allow the microbiota of the plant material to actually jumpstart the process of fermentation. So mimicking like what we would do to um, pre-digest that plant material in the mouth, right? Mechanical chewing. And so what would happen is they would get this cold extract, oil extract of the herb and an oil. And the oil that base that they would use is already healthy. They were using sprouted flax and I think one other type
Germ
of
oil.
oil. Yeah, germ oil. Yeah, those are
Mhm.
the two base oils that they primarily use. And those already are super
Mhm.
beneficial. And now they're adding an herb and they're using a lot of aromatic herbs to extract the aromatic components from it. So a lot of them are going to be spices, so they're food grade. And so they noticed that they could come do this as like a travel spice or like an extra healthy superfood spice, right? That would, according to the in-house test that they did, they had an even higher antioxidant index, the ORAC, than compared to even the essential oil or the tincture or a tea extract of the same plant. So it turned out to be a really great dosage form. And again, you can like add it to food, which is fun. And so we had the idea of making medicinal grade formulations. And so I gave them my top 4 formulas to target specific areas that we thought were the most popular and something people ask all the time when it comes to self-care. So we did like a gut health blend, which also works on like blood sugar metabolism and liver health. Then it also kind of has some skin benefits. Then we did a stress blend with a lot of nervines, and then we did a sleep blend with some sedative type herbs. And finally, we did a sort of throat and
Mhm.
cough
Cough,
blend.
cough be gone.
Right. Yes. Just because again, during COVID times, this became one of my most popular formulas. And cough is one of these things that tends to linger for a long time, even after
Mhm.
like your body's done
Yeah.
fighting respiratory illness. So I just didn't see a lot of things on the market that had a nice formula. You need to buy like a bunch of products to get all
Mhm.
your needs met, as far as I noticed. And so we decided to go for these 4 blends, and
Mhm.
we're doing wholesale with different pharmacies also in my network here in New York. And we're doing online. You can actually buy the stress and sleep formulas on Amazon. You might be able to buy all of them on Amazon, but I know the stress one is really popular on Amazon. So yeah, and then we also have our own website where you can order from as well.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you want our audience to know about, but to check out now? And then I'll give you a little bit more plug for your other things.
Yeah, I have a couple of intro level workshops that you can check out. So if you go to my website, marinabooksov.com, and you can click work with me, and you'll see kind of a bunch of things on the menu. So if you're interested in a more professional level mentorship, there's a link to read more about that and apply. There's a link to the Lecker formulations if you're interested and wanting to try that. And there's also a contact me button in case you want to just chat about any collaborations or have any questions. And yeah, there's also 1 or 2 workshops that you can take that, just to dive in and deep your feet into clinical herbalism.
That's awesome. Yeah. And Marina has her own podcast. She's regularly featuring folks. It's pretty fabulous and it can be connected with on LinkedIn, Facebook, and not Facebook, Instagram, and her website, like she said. Well, thank you, Marina, for coming on again and sharing some great insights about the product making, about pharmacies, and the branching into using more holistic methods as a pharmacist, introducing some great terms and organizations today for us to look into and learn more about you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I always love to see you, Laura, and network. So, whoever wants to get in touch after, unfortunately, my Facebook profile has been down, but please reach out on my website. I'm on Instagram and all the other platforms Laura mentioned.
Honestly, your platforms are big on all the other platforms, and I think they need to get their stuff together and get you back on there. But we'll be sharing this with our email list as well. So
All right, awesome. Thank you. Have a good night,
thanks.
everyone.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.